Government is necessary not because man is naturally bad, but because man is by nature more individualistic than social. Today we are covering both Thomas Hobbes and Niccolo Machiavelli, who have very similar views about leadership and government. So here's Thomas Hobbes, 1588 to 1679. He wrote a famous book called The Leviathan towards the end of his life. So, English philosopher, his book The Leviathan is based on a social contract. A social contract, hopefully you've learned about, is where the citizens make an agreement with the government whereby they give up certain rights and certain laws are there to protect them. Kind of like the Mayflower Compact, you might recall. So when Hobbes was alive, he was alive during the English Civil War when he was living in fear. There was sort of anarchy in the streets. And he thought, you know what, we need a strong leader to keep rule. So his book, The Leviathan, is going to advocate an absolute monarch, meaning a king or a dictator, is necessary to preserve peace and order. So his view of society is that life is a mixture of selfishness, violence, and fear, along with deceit. He called this the state of nature. Now, a lot of times in class, I will do a state of nature game, whereby if the kids work together, they'll get more points, but ultimately the selfishness of students will result in them not getting points because they won't work together. And that's kind of what Hobbes argued, is that we're just by nature selfish. He said we're machines. We've been programmed or conditioned into appetites, those are things we want, and aversions, things we don't want. And once we have this mindset subconsciously conditioned into us, we are a machine that just acts, generally speaking, selfishly to optimize, have as many appetites fulfilled, and to stay away from many aversions as possible. He doubts if it's possible for a human to truly ever be unselfish. Because, you know what, some people will say, oh, I'm unselfish, I'm kind, but when you really dig into it, how many of the people who are unselfish and kind are actually doing it kind of in a way to get more favor? In other words, to feel good about themselves. You help somebody and then you're the person who helped them. And now you feel good about yourself. Did you help them out of kindness or did you help them out of a selfish reason? Hobbes' view is we were just the selfish people. We can't be trusted to coexist along peacefully with each other. We're going to be fighting. That's our mindset. We're prone to fight to have the most we can for ourselves. That's why a strong government needs to keep us in line. This strong, obedient ruler will protect us from one another. That's the plan of the Leviathan. The condition of man is a condition of war of everyone against everyone. That's really pessimistic when you think about it, but then think about capitalism. Think about class rank. Think about the nature of the beast where we compare ourselves versus others. So the Leviathan, his most famous book, Leviathan is a sea monster. Hobbes' book, The Leviathan, said that we have to obey government authority even if it's imperfect, even if it's wrong, even if it's too hard, in order to risk the chaos and bloodshed that will happen without that strong authority. He said that you need to stop people fighting by forcing them to behave. And so the Leviathan was a biblical name for a giant sea monster, and the quote was, "Men will agree amongst themselves to submit to some other man voluntarily," meaning the dictator or Leviathan, "and they will do it on confidence that they will be protected by him against others." In other words, instead of being in fear of everyone else in society, now we're only in fear of the mass power dictator Leviathan who will protect us from the others. So his view of the social contract, as I said, life, he called it, was a state of nature of nasty, brutish, and short. And really, without a strong government, would we kill each other and take each other's property? I mean, the movie The Purge, I believe, is a period of time when they pull off the laws and people can do what they want. In other words, that's the natural state of man, is to get as much as they can for themselves and act on their desires. He said if we really want to protect our natural rights, we have to give complete authority to this absolute ruler who will keep us in line. So, any man who fails to consent, meaning who does not give in to Leviathan, should be destroyed, with the exception he did put of natural fools, small children, and madmen, who aren't going to understand the thing in the first place. And at the same time, anyone who has this sovereign power, the king, the president, the dictator, they cannot be punished for whatever they do, because whatever they do is righteous. They got to do what they got to do to keep everybody in line, so we can't hold them accountable. This has actually come up in discussion over the last couple of years with Trump, or back in the day with Nixon. If a leader does something, can he be held accountable if it's quote-unquote against the law, or is he above the law? Now, another philosopher, John Locke, he felt, you know what, if you give complete power to one leader, that's worse than the state of nature. You're better off having the competitive, selfish natures of people working against and with each other than one big Leviathan dictator keeping everybody in line. So the social contract. He said that an individual, that's us, if we have rationality, the ability to think, we will think what's best for us. And what's best for us is to give up voluntarily some of our freedoms in order so that the government can be strong. The individuals will agree to this social contract, certain laws, we can't kill people, we can't speed, we can't drink or drive. These are potentially restraining our rights because I want to drink or drive. No, for the good of society, you no longer may do that. That's a law that we agree to. A government, as a citizen, is going to keep us in line to protect us. For Hobbes, though, this social contract involves the absolute government who can rule any way they want. There's no consent, there's no democracy, because people can't be trusted. I mean, if we voted on certain issues, can we, right now across America, if people were asked, can I download music legally, or do I have to wear a mask? Oftentimes, selfish interests come above rationality, and so Hobbes felt the government needed to tell them what to do. So, do you agree with Hobbes? Is this pessimistic or is this realistic? Are people just generally evil and selfish? And I want to make the statement here. Selfish doesn't mean evil, but some people interpret selfishness as not being good. Hobbes was just straight up. People are selfish and we need a brutal sea monster to keep us in line. We will submit to their power and their power will keep us safe. Do you agree or disagree with Hobbes? The second philosopher we're covering today, who's similar, is Niccolo Machiavelli. He wrote a book, The Prince, in Italy. Politics have no relations to morals. So sometimes the kids in the past, I don't know if you're too young, but Machiavelli was a nickname that Tupac would use. I don't know if Tupac is before your time. And he was asked, it's not like I idolize this guy Machiavelli. I idolize the type of thinking where you do whatever's going to make you achieve your goal. And that's what Machiavelli was about. The end justified the means. The means is what you have to do to get the ends. The means could be bad, could be wrong, could be lying, but if the end result is good, that's good. So Machiavelli's book was during the Italian Renaissance, and it really does shape political philosophy. You do see some leaders using his concepts. The Prince was his famous book. He wasn't a leader, but he wrote this book to guide the prince, the leader. How are you going to get power and how are you going to keep power? And it's famous for recommending not do the right thing, but to use whatever extreme measures you need to do to govern. You could use force, you can manipulate, you can lie. And so Machiavellian is now an adjective, which oftentimes they'll say a president or a leader who does something that others consider wrong or immoral or devious or deceptive. These things oftentimes, if done by a leader, we'll call them Machiavellian. Here's a quote. Machiavelli said that if as a ruler you accept that your every action must pass moral scrutiny, meaning other people saying it's okay, then you will fail. Be defeated by an opponent who does not submit to the same moral test. To hold on to power, you have not only to master the crafts of deception and treachery, but to be prepared to use them when necessary. Some people find this very pessimistic. You would want the leader to be sort of the pinnacle or the example or the role model for behaving a certain way, but that wasn't the view. The view of Machiavelli is the leader needs to do what the leader needs to do. So, Machiavelli, the original one, not Tupac, felt that certain Christian traits that were coming in, we leave religion alone more or less in this class, but some Christian traits like being kind and generous and tolerant, that's only going to weaken a leader. Because you know what? As a leader, will the other side, where the people you're dealing with on the other side, other countries or governments, are they going to play by those same rules? And if they don't, well, then you need to play by different strategies, no matter how treacherous or immoral they might be. A man who wants to make a profession of goodness in everything is bound to come to ruin among so many who are not good. In other words, back in the day when they had steroids in baseball, steroids allowed people to hit a baseball better. One player said, well, if I don't take steroids, I'm going to lose because everybody else is. I have to stay even with them. Well, if you're negotiating with the other side and the other side is treacherous, don't you need to be treacherous as well? So one of the things that he talked about was the use of criminal virtue, which is two different words. Criminal is obviously more negative, virtue being positive. He said like a brutal action like an assassination that's going to keep people in check and in fear. It doesn't matter if it's fair. You just want to assert your power over them. I've given this story before, but when I was a student, I had a teacher, a great teacher, a funny teacher. But in the second week of school, randomly during class, he just started yelling at a girl when she was laughing. And he didn't let up, and he was loud, and it went on for a couple of minutes. People thought he was fooling in the beginning, but it's clear he was not fooling. Sometimes the kid would be almost to tears. And then years later, I was teaching in that same building, and I heard him, I was near his room, and I heard once again yelling coming out of the room in the second week of school. And then again the following year. And at some point I asked him, you're the most mellow guy ever. Why do I hear you yell? And he says, well, you know, I pick a kid usually early in the year and I make an example of them. And then everybody else is sort of fearful of me. And therefore, they know I'm cool up to a point. But if I get stern, they get quiet. Criminal virtue, doing something that's not right that you think has a good means. So a new prince may do things that are immoral to achieve their goals. This teacher wanted a class that he would have control of, and simply by unloading on a kid, even if unjustly, he was able to keep order. So Machiavelli said that cruel actions sometimes can actually lead to beneficial means, or ends. The ends justify the means. Men are so simple and they yield, that means they give up, so readily to the desires of the moment that he who will trick will always find another who will be suffered to be tricked. Meaning, we are so foolish, we just think about what we want in the moment, that if you're going to be devious, if you're going to be deceptive, you'll always find people to be devious and deceptive. If you tell people what they want to hear, then they often will believe you, even when it's irrational. So, here are some of the rules that the prince, that was laid out in the book The Prince. First, the leader should always wear a mask, and I swear that this was actually done, this PowerPoint was done previous to COVID. Obviously, the implication, the irony of it during COVID is a little bit different. The mask we're talking about is hiding the true self to the people. Don't let them know why you're doing what you're doing. Kind of put out a public persona, a mask, and behind the scenes, you're doing your own thing. Rule number 2. You got to be prepared at times to work against and act against humanity and religion and charity. He said a lot of times you need to do what you need to do. He talked about to change yourself in the winds of fortune. So if you need to do something that's unjust or immoral, well, that's what you have to do. You can think way back when FDR locking up people, Japanese Americans in concentration camps because we were fearful that they might be spies. That would be an example of doing something that's just wrong against humanity, but perhaps it was for the greater good. A quote from Machiavelli: "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend themselves from wolves. So a leader must therefore be a fox to recognize the traps, and a lion to frighten wood." You need both to be deceptive behind the scenes, manipulate, but when needed, you need to have those sharp teeth in order to potentially instill fear and cause people to behave a certain way. Rule number 3. We should always hide our acts and intentions about morality. This is similar to the mask thing, but he said a prince should appear, upon seeing and hearing him, to be full of mercy and faithfulness and integrity and kindness. For everyone sees what you seem to be, few will perceive what you really are. And those few do not dare to contradict the opinion of the many, who have the majesty of the state to defend them. Meaning, if you can convince people that you're a good person, and people are very gullible, then very few people will speak out against it. Very few people are going to want to be in the minority and say, no, no, he's a good guy. It's about appearances. Rule number 4. You should acquire esteem through the accomplishments of great undertakings and examples of their great talents. In other words, you want to get the people to believe that you are a man of great undertakings and superior intelligence. You are super smart. You are the most talented ever. The more you tell the people that, if they begin to believe it, they will value you to the point that they overlook the evil or immoral things you might do. Men should be either treated generously or destroyed, because they'll take revenge for even slight injuries. For a heavy one, they cannot. In other words, if you're going to discipline somebody, you discipline them very, very strongly. And if it's a major discipline, ultimately, it would be the ending of you. Rule number 5. The prince needs to use fear to keep his power, to keep people in line. The idea is, as a leader, is it better to be feared than loved? You've had teachers, you have parents, you have administrators, principals over your time, people in authority. Some people try to be more loved. Some people try to be feared. I don't know what's better. That's good for discussion. What is a better way of leadership, to be feared or loved? At the same time, the prince needs to be very clear they can't be despised or hated. He's got to make people believe and recognize all of his greatness, because they'll turn on you if they begin to question if they like you or not. Better to be feared than loved. If you truly fear someone, you'll overlook the fact you despise them, because that fear won't even let that thought come into your mind. Think about a leader like Stalin or Hitler, who was able to keep power doing evil things because people bought into what they were saying. Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we got to choose between them, it's far safer to be feared than to be loved. That was Machiavelli's opinion. So, are there examples in politics of Machiavellian actions? Yes, all of the time, almost every president, going back to World War II, probably earlier, probably to the beginning of time. But FDR, I already mentioned the concept of the Japanese internment camps. And here's a quote he gave more times than you would care to understand. I have said this before, but I shall say it again and again and again. Your boys are not going to be sent into any foreign wars. He said that leading up into the campaign because he needed the people to believe he wasn't going to go to war so he could be elected. But meanwhile, he was plotting with Churchill as a way to get into the war. It was misleading the public for what he felt was a greater goal. The Watergate scandal you probably know about. Nixon doing a lot of things illegally. He was trying to assure that he got reelected because he thought that the other side, the Democrats led by George McGovern in 1972, might do bad. So Nixon did a lot of bad and a lot of a cover-up in order to try to keep power. He was caught and he was ultimately resigned from office. Ronald Reagan, one of the most popular presidents in recent history, a Republican from 80 to 88. He had the Iran-Contra scandal. Iran was our enemy then, like they are now. Reagan secretly sold weapons to them to raise money to give to a group called the Contras. The Contras were a group that was fighting communists. Our Senate said don't do it, and Reagan did it anyway, and when he was caught, he was later in his term, and maybe he had Parkinson's, or he did have Alzheimer's. He might not remember, but people of his administration went to jail, just like they did with Nixon. Bill Clinton was known to be a liar. Sometimes they called him Slick Willie because he was a used car salesman. He could sell, ice to an Eskimo, and he would lie a lot, and not to mention his affairs. I should have Barack Obama in here because he did things that people would definitely see as being Machiavellian in times. Trump is our most recent president. The idea that he has more than once called himself a very stable genius. I mean, just the fact, if you've got to tell people you're smart, why are you doing that? Most smart people I know don't say that. But if you want somebody to believe you're smart, if you need them to believe you're smart, you'll repeat it, as he has often. And early in his term, a point that could be brought up for discussion, his administration purposely separated families, immigrant families, from their border as they tried to cross in from Mexico. They'd keep the little kids, send the family at home. Many people thought this was terrible and immoral. The view of his administration was, you know what? They're not going to want to try it if they know that if that's what might happen. It's the idea most people speed, but if you were going to be executed the first time you were speeding, would you speed? Sometimes you have to do things that are maybe unethical in order to get what you want. So, do you agree with Machiavelli? Should our leaders follow him and use criminal virtue as a way to ultimately keep power? Both Hobbes and Machiavelli have views that some people find slightly pessimistic, but are they right? Write journals, and I will see you soon.